Okay, so, all right, Confucian philosophy. Let's talk a little bit about Confucianism. Now, today we're going to talk about Confucianism, Taoism, legalism. Um, so, the skill is looking at primary sources. The last skill we had was we looked at secondary sources. Today we're going to look at primary sources for content. So for content is to how to kind of summarize. Your activity will be the salt and iron debate. So go to that activity in order to complete this. You should have done your reading for Confucianism as well. And do your reading for Hinduism because that'll be the next one. Hinduism tomorrow. So again, primary sources for content. The objective for this one is the cultural traditions in China and how they influence their neighboring regions as well as how they shaped society. So that's kind of going to be the focus today. How did Confucianism and Taoism and legalism influence the neighboring societies, and how did it influence China as well? The vocabulary words that we're going to need to know are Confucius, filial piety, the five unequal relationships, Confucianism, and mandate of heaven. So we're going to answer these questions. What are the core beliefs of Confucianism? How did these core beliefs influence the family? How did those core beliefs influence society? And how did it influence China's neighbors? So, um, over the next couple of days, we're going to be talking about different foundational cultures, and that one of them is Confucianism. The others are Hinduism, which is the oldest, Judaism, and Christianity, as well as Buddhism and Islam. Those are the main culture traditions that we'll be focusing on for this unit. We'll also be focusing on the lives of women in these particular areas as a foundational cultural tradition. So here you see the dates. Hinduism 2000 is the oldest one, but we're going to actually start with Confucianism. So Confucianism actually started during the Warring States period. It was a period of kind of mayhem and lawlessness, and that's where a lot of these thinkers began to think, how could this be fixed? Um, but it didn't come into with the government and start being used by the government until Han times. It then lost its luster when the Han dynasty fell. So during the Sui dynasty, it kind of waned away, and Buddhism kind of took over. As you can see here, Confucianism kind of went down. Buddhism began to come up during the Tang dynasty, and then finally during the Song, Confucianism and Buddhism kind of melted together into Neo-Confucianism. But we'll get into that in another lecture. We'll also be talking in another lecture about the tributary system and how that started during Han times. Remember, one of the focuses on this chapter is also when we start talking about government, where they got their ideas from. And the Song dynasty got a lot of their ideas from previous dynasties, those being the Qin, the Han, the Sui, and the Tang. So, the first thing we need to talk about, though, is what is the difference between a philosophy and a religion? So, let's see. The differences in religion is that a religion emphasizes the divine, the supernatural forces of the universe. It develops rituals for important life events or important times of the year. So you have a ritual, say, for example, Christmas as an important life event in Christianity. That's supposed to be when Jesus was born. It focuses on how individuals can achieve salvation. So if you act right, you do things that are positive in the world, then you get to heaven, right? It offers answers for the unexplainable. It tells people, well, this was created by God or that was created by the gods. The different religions have different beliefs, but all of them offer answers for that things that cannot be explained or that they cannot explain. Um, Religion is something that requires faith, because you don't have any actual real proof of any of these things. Nobody's ever seen God. Nobody's ever actually, uh, you know, died and come back in reality. And so it requires a leap of faith on folks. This is why it's difficult to talk to people about religion, because some people's faith is stronger concerning their religion than other people. But that's a big one. It requires faith. A philosophy, now if you look at this section, focuses more on what happens on earth, but does not necessarily deny that there are gods or spirits, but it does focus on what's going on here. It requires education more than rituals. So it requires reading text, reading books, understanding, being educated. It focuses on how to live life without worrying about after death. In a philosophy, it's not like they tell you, well, if you live a good life, you'll this will happen in the afterlife. It just says, no, this is what you're supposed to do to live a good life, and this is why. It ponders questions on everything about society, human behavior, and government. Uh, and it can involve scientific research using evidence from history. So it's kind of devoid of any actual faith. It focuses a lot on the here and now, and therefore it does not answer some of the unexplained things. That's why it does not deny the existence of gods and spirits, because those unexplained things in life still need to be explained by gods and spirits. Now, some of the similarities that these things have is that they both focus on what's good and bad about human behavior. They both emphasize on how humans should treat each other. They both have handwritten doctrines or books to follow. They both are used by the states, and when I say the states, I mean the country. Well, they're both used by the government to create order and unity. So during the time that we're talking about, governments use philosophy and religion to create order and unity. Sometimes it reinforces and justifies inequality in the society. It reinforces gender differences, it reinforces class differences, especially in the case of Hinduism, um, in the society. So again, for the three classical Chinese philosophies we'll be focusing on is Confucianism, Taoism, and Legalism, with a focus on Confucianism. So I will be talking briefly about legalism, a little bit more about Taoism, and then a little bit deeper on Confucianism. So let's start with legalism. Remember that what we're trying to answer with these three philosophies and when they came out was during the Warring States period. So the question is, how can these ideas fix the problems of the period of the Warring States? So legalism was started by a guy with the name of Han Feizi. Legalism says that the only things needed in the civilization are agriculture and the military. You only need food and a way to protect yourself. That's it. In the book of Lord Shang, he says that people can be easily controlled with strict laws and harsh punishments. You steal some bread, you die. You uh, beat somebody, you die. In fact, a lot of the punishments in the book of Lord Shang is actually capital punishment, death. So, you know, it was a kind of a I wouldn't want to live during that time because I'd I'd have been dead already. I've done some things, not many, but some. Um, so okay, so he says, how would these ideas fix the problems of the Warring States period? He says, fear leads to order. If people fear these harsh consequences, then you'll have order. Here we have a painting of the first emperor to actually start using legalism as part of his state, and that was Qin Shi Huangdi in the Qin period, the first guy to unify China. We'll talk more about him when we start talking about the Great Wall of China, but he unifies China, he builds the Great Wall, and one of the things that he does is he punishes a lot of these state intellectuals, these teachers, these learned individuals that go against some of the things he was trying to create. So he buries them alive and burns their books. So again, legalism, harsh punishment. You talk about me, boom, we bury you. Boom, we burn the book you wrote. So there, and I couldn't think of anything harsher for a teacher than being buried for not agreeing with the government. So again, fear leads to order. Then we have another philosophy, and that is Taoism. The Taoist text is the Tao Te Ching, and it was written by Lao Tzu. You see this guy on a mule, and let's figure out how his ideas would fix the problems of the Warring States period. So he says that there's a thing called the Tao, or the way of nature, the way of the cosmos. That's the most important thing, and that doing nothing accomplishes everything. Boy, I wish my wife would read this book. Hey, look, by doing nothing, I can fix everything in the house. That honey-do list, it'll get finished if I do none of it. So, but no, that's not actually what he means. He says that humans should follow the Tao, or the way, and that's called Wu Wei. Human beings following the Tao. That you live in harmony with others and in nature. Let me explain that a little further by reading some of the things that he wrote. It says, once Lao Tzu was asked how he found the way, or the Tao, of heaven. And he said, I made great effort. I tried and tried and tried to find it, but I couldn't. Then one day I was sitting under a tree. A dry leaf fell, slowly moving with the wind, then the wind moved it north. The leaf moved north. The wind moved south. The leaf moved south. Then the wind stopped and the leaf fell down, rested beautifully on the earth. Then again, there was some wind again, and the leaf rose high in the sky. Suddenly, I became that dry leaf, and suddenly I understood the way of heaven, the Tao. No longer was I separate from heaven, but I was part of heaven. Wherever heaven went, I went. If it changed its mind, then I changed my mind. If it stopped, I stopped. If it flowed, I flowed. That is how I found the way. So as you can see, the way isn't just not doing anything, but doing things when they come. So, tell my wife not to do something, she would have said, no, now it's the time to do it. Um, so how would the Tao and Wu Wei, humans following the Tao, how would this fix the ideas or problems of the Warring States period? Well, he figures competition ends, government dissolves, urban centers disappear. So basically, you get rid of civilization, and humans live in small, peaceful villages. So he would be one of those folks that said, hey, the agricultural revolution, maybe it wasn't as great as we think it was, because these urban centers appeared and government appeared. So he wants to get rid of government and wants to get rid of urban centers. And he says that will lead to peace, because people will live in these peaceful villages. Again, it's up to you to figure out what you think. Now, for Confucianism, we're going to talk about Ren Li and filial piety. So, but I'm not going to fill them out in the same way that I did here. I'm actually going to use a separate handout for those three. So let's start talking about Confucius and Confucianism. Now, these are paintings. These are Taoist paintings. And as you can see in these Taoist paintings, the center of the painting is nature. Can you find the people? Here are the people. Unlike in Western paintings, the center is not the person. You don't have a big picture of somebody. It's nature. You see it even more so in this one. Can you find the people here in this one? Just look. Here they go, crossing a bridge. But again, if you look at the painting, what you mostly see is the mountain, the trees, and so on and so forth. Again, Taoist. In this one, can you see the people on the road, on their horses or donkeys or whatever? Right over here. On boats. But again, the center of the painting is nature. Eventually, Lao Tzu left on the back of that mule, and he disappeared. When I think about Lei Tzu, I think about this guy. Yeah. So again, um, you get Taoism and you get Confucianism and you get this. This is the yin yang. It actually represents duality and not uh, opposites. Duality means they work together in concert together. So in China, you have Confucianism and Taoism, and most people use both of those things in concert or together. Um, so let's talk about Confucianism. Confucianism is a Chinese philosophy where morals and good character lead to social harmony. That's what Confucius believed. He said morals and good character would lead to social harmony. Confucius argued that the government and the society should be based on family structure, creating order through China. That everything was based on unequal relationships between superiors and inferiors. There are five relationships, only one of them is equal, and that is the one between friend and friend. Now, as you saw in the previous graphic organizer, we have filial piety, Ren, and Li. Now, what is filial piety? Filial piety means that the inferior person is supposed to follow and respect the superior person. Now, in a friend-to-friend relationship, you do not have filial piety, or you have mutual filial piety, where both friends are mutually faithful towards each other. Now, in a relationship between a wife and a husband, filial piety means that the wives are expected to be subservient to their husbands. Listen to the husband, listen to the rules that they set forth for the home, and then you'll have order, you'll have harmony. Now, in a son-father relationship, filial piety means to honor one's parents and obey the father's authority. And that'll create, once again, harmony within the family, harmony within society. Father sets the rules. And as we can see from what I'm talking about here, we see a highly patriarchal society where the father is the head. Both the wife and the sons and daughters are supposed to listen to the rules set forth by the father. And then we have an elder sibling and a younger sibling. And filial piety means to respect and honor one's elders. And that's not just between younger and older siblings, but also in society. So if you're a younger person and you see an elder person out in the streets, or you have an uncle or an aunt or somebody outside of your nuclear family, you're supposed to respect them. And we see that quite a bit in a lot of societies during this time. And finally, uh, the last and probably most important relationship is the one between the emperor and the subjects. And that filial piety means that everyone is supposed to listen to the state officials and the emperor. So in this case, the state officials and the emperor are like the father figure. And we're supposed to listen to him. And as you follow these five relationships, you end up once again with harmony and social order. Now, this isn't the end of it. There's also a thing called Ren. Ren translates into benevolence or goodness or love for others. Now, Ren is reserved for the superiors towards the inferiors. Confucius described Ren as a deep concern for the well being of others, making the ability to perform right or honorable actions. So if you have Ren, you have respect for others and you do right by other people. So if the husband has Ren, then they do right by the wife, and the father has Ren, then they do right by the sons and daughters. And if the elder siblings or the older people in society have Ren, then they do good things by the youngers. And if the emperor uses Ren, then they'll do right by their subjects. So superiors are supposed to respect and love inferiors. If superiors do not show compassion towards these inferiors, then it'll create chaos in the society. You will not have social harmony. The emperor and the government officials need to pay attention to the needs and the well-being of their subjects in order to create that stability and avoid chaos. So again, Ren and filial piety kind of go hand in hand together, uh, kind of like the yin and the yang. Uh, it is a complement of each other. And then lastly, you have Li, and that's veneration of the ancestors. And here you have a picture of somebody at um, in somebody's grave venerating their ancestors. So that creates kind of like a social pyramid. However, this isn't the Chinese and the Confucian social pyramid does not look like this, where the emperor is on top, the nobles, the merchants, the peasants, and slaves. In a Confucian society, peasants actually take a more important role. You remember what we said that um, um, peasants were important to feed folks, right? So this is a Confucian social pyramid where you have the scholar bureaucrats, obviously at the very top. I didn't put it down, but that's the emperor, and then the peasants, and then the artisans, the merchants. Since they don't actually create anything, they don't actually make anything, then they're not as respected. They're really barely above mean people. In a Confucian society, peasants are far more important than merchants. And this is different than when we start talking about Islam. In Islam, merchants are at the very top. They're well respected, and it's a religion that kind of does espouse trade and merchant ideas. So the mandate of heaven. Um, the mandate of heaven is an idea that says that Chinese emperors have the right to rule and that it was given to them by the heavens. Now, this is an idea created before Confucianism. It was actually created during the Shang and Zhou dynasties, well before, to kind of justify that they were there after the Shia dynasty because the heavens allowed them to. The mandate of heaven again. And that kind of leads into the dynastic cycle, something that you'll see quite a lot in Chinese history. What is the dynastic cycle? Well, when a dynasty gets old, they tax too much, and they stop following Ren, they stop protecting and treating people fairly, they treat people unfairly, then they'll lose the mandate of heaven. And you have problems like food shortages, droughts, floods, invaders, corruption, revolts. So a lot of these problems will lead to the dynasty actually falling and a new dynasty claiming that mandate. Now, that new dynasty then brings peace, rebuilds, protects, and there you go. And how does the Confucianism work into all of this? Well, if your dynasty follows Ren and if the people follow filial piety, then your dynasty goes on for longer than other dynasties and you avoid losing the mandate of heaven. So, once again, I'm not going to really get deep into this right now. But you're going to read a little bit more in your book and talk about how Confucianism spread. Now, Confucianism, even though it's not a religion, it spread kind of like religion. How do religions spread? We're going to use the three M's to try to memorize this because this is a concept we're going to talk quite a bit about. That religions and ideas spread either through merchants, missionaries, and that's people of that religion actually going out and trying to convert people. That's more so in Christianity and Islam than something like Confucianism. There are no Confucius missionaries when Confucianism starts. And lastly, the military, by military conquest. So here is China from 900 to 1200 during the Song dynasty. This is the heartland of Confucianism, where Confucianism began. And as the Song dynasty and other dynasties spread and colonized the surrounding areas, then Confucianism spread there through colonization, I guess you could say militarily. And finally, through military conquest. Now, you see here that Confucianism spread to Vietnam and Korea. Let's go back so you can see. So this peninsula here, Red Peninsula here, that's Korea, and this is Vietnam. The Chinese end up making tributary states out of these two places, In other words, they're not part of China, but they're countries that have to give China tribute. And as a result, a lot of the cultural values from China um, actually end up spilling over into Korea and Vietnam. It also, through trade, spills into the southern part of Vietnam here and Japan. Now, Japan, the Chinese are unable to actually defeat the Japanese, so the Japanese were able to selectively take some Confucianist ideas and keep out other Confucianist ideas that they felt like did not um, help them out. So you have this kind of graphic organizer that I want you to build. Um, Actually, I want you to erase here, here, and here. So you're just going to do political and cultural. We'll do economic later on. We're going to read your AMSCO pages 9 through 11. And in class, I'll also tell you which pages you can read from Strayer in order to be able to fill out how exactly did China affect Korea, Vietnam, and Japan culturally, um, and how it affected politically. I mean, politically. Okay. So again, now your AP skill is looking at primary sources for content. So go to that assignment and get that done. Get that turned in for a grade and get that into your notebook. Thank you very much.